Just let me know when you want me to start, Steve.
Yeah, I think let's just give it a minute while everybody arrives, as it were, and then we can start. Yeah.
Want to start now?
Yeah, it's kind of 1 o'clock, isn't it? We can be very prompt with these online ones.
Okay, thanks. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to this very important and timely meeting to launch the final report of Liverpool City Region's APPG, Build Back Better inquiry, Level Up, Recover and Deliver Clean, Green and Inclusive Growth. So the report has been developed throughout 2021, during which the LCR APPG took evidence of 4 sessions, and we heard from 20 witnesses, including government businesses, the TUC, Labour Party reps, young people, key stakeholders, the partners of the APPG, and of course the combined authority, along with MPs and peers from the city region, and more than 150 people representing a great diversity of organisations attended the 4 sessions. But I'm very sorry to report that Sue Jarvis, the director of the Heseltine Institute, has sadly suffered a bereavement and is unable to join us today. However, her colleague and co-author of the report, James Hickson, is here. And we're going to start with a short presentation of the final report from him and Steve Barwick from the APP Secretariat. So the report includes sections on skills and innovation, infrastructure, transport and housing, and net zero growth. And it makes 12 recommendations for consideration in the forthcoming spending review. That these would assist Liverpool City Region's efforts to level up, recover and deliver clean, green and inclusive growth. So I'd now like to invite James and Steve to present the inquiry report. So over to you both.
Okay. Well, thanks very much. And I will just very quickly just remind people about the process. If you go to the next slide, Owen. This is the report is available now. It's on the website, so there's a link. But as the report makes clear, just to sort of set this a bit in the context, I mean, you know, Liverpool City Region has been hit hard, like everywhere has, by the pandemic. And as of August, there have been almost 200,000 cases. There have been, sadly, tragic loss of life. A phenomenal number of people in work have been furloughed at some point, and that scheme has obviously kept society and the economy afloat. But it hasn't prevented claimant count from rising somewhat. And of course, there are fears that as furlough ends, that claimant count might rise. But it isn't all gloom at all. And in fact, we know that the whole region is very determined to have progress. And in fact, there had been progress over the last decade. There had been a 2 billion addition to the economy in real terms. It has developed a stronger, more diverse and innovative business base. And it has made efforts, particularly under the combined authority, to deliver those kind of, to meet those skills and employment gaps. And I think what's interesting about the pandemic as well, and where we are, is the fact that actually it has created a new kind of mood, and that there is this sense about Build Back Better, and that isn't, I think, just a slogan. From what we heard during the course of the inquiry, that's something that people want to make a reality, so that the city region is more community focused, more inclusive, more equal and more green. So if we go to the next slide, I don't think I need to say a great deal here because I think we've already mentioned it. So I wanted the presentation to be quite brief. So I'd just like to invite James really to just go through in terms of the 3 areas that we focused on, to look at what we heard and the recommendations, and then I'll just come in with some conclusions at the end. So James.
Thanks, Steve. If we can go to the next slide then. So yeah, the first of those 3 areas is skills and innovation. And while there's been significant progress over recent years, as Steve just mentioned, the city region continues to face a number of long-standing challenges in skills and educational attainment. And so the first challenge that we've set out in this section is around improving attainment in maths and English. We know that low levels of maths and English create particular problems as students leave education and enter the jobs market. And maths and English are also vital for STEM-based technical training. Raising school attainment in these subjects would also enable FE providers to focus more on developing the advanced skills needed by employers rather than providing catch-up education for adults. But unfortunately, it's currently felt there's something of a postcode lottery in this area. Our second challenge is around addressing skills gaps in adults. So although the devolution of the adult education budget is already helping to close this gap, the lack of opportunities for workers to retrain and gain new skills has emerged as a particularly acute issue over recent years and creates barriers to career progression. And so close cooperation between FE providers and employers is going to be vital over coming years as new jobs emerge and the economy evolves after the pandemic. Our third challenge relates to the city region's innovation ecosystem and how this can be further strengthened. LCR is well placed to support the government's intention to make the UK a global hub for innovation by 2035, with several institutions delivering world-leading research and innovation in areas with significant growth potential. Government should therefore work closely with the CA, the LEP, universities, and other stakeholders in the city region to further develop a local research and innovation strategy and support continued investment in R&D as a key priority. Next slide. And so the recommendations under this theme are, firstly, that government should work with the city region to deliver a London Challenge style targeted intervention in schools to improve attainment in key subjects, including maths and English. Second, government should devolve more powers over adult education alongside a national commitment to increase funding in post-18 education for all. Third, government should collaborate closely with LCR on research and innovation, acknowledging and supporting the city region's target that R&D investment should be equivalent to 5% of local GVA. And finally, and more broadly, government should now work with the city region to deliver an approach to levelling up in Liverpool city region that utilises local knowledge, expertise and devolved leadership. Next slide, please. Our second theme is around infrastructure, housing and transport. The city region has very strong foundations to build on in this respect. Merseyrail is a well-run and heavily used transport network that connects communities across the city region. Many areas have affordable, good quality housing, and ultra-fast broadband is currently being rolled out across all 6 boroughs, yet significant challenges do remain. The first challenge we've highlighted here is around improving housing conditions and around building new homes. Poor quality, ageing housing stock in the city region poses significant challenges for fuel poverty, for environmental sustainability, and for public health. More than half the private homes in LCR are thought to have been built before the 1940s, and an estimated 435,000 homes currently hold an EPC rating of D or below. Whilst retrofitting existing housing stock will be a key part of ensuring all residents have a safe, warm and affordable home, the CA has calculated that at least £12 billion is going to be required to improve and decarbonise local housing stocks. Challenge 2 is around encouraging LCR residents to walk, cycle and use public transport. Reliance on car travel remains high, with 68% of journeys to work currently made by car, with consequences for the environment and our health. Increasing use of active travel and public transport will be vital to overcoming this reliance on cars. However, only 2% of journeys are currently made by bike and 30% on foot. Meanwhile, for many passengers, the city region's bus network has become complex, disjointed, less reliable and more expensive, yet it remains vital. Prior to the pandemic, almost 60% of people used the bus 3 or more times a week. And our final challenge is around enhancing social infrastructure and community assets. The last decade has seen the closure of many community assets such as libraries, Sure Start centres and sports facilities. This has consequences for individual residents, but we also know that communities with good social infrastructure recover better after crises, have improved public health outcomes and reduced conflict. The City Regions Town Centre Commission has recently identified the particular importance of rebuilding social infrastructure in Liverpool City Region and has called for more community ownership and operation of public assets. Next slide. And so our recommendations here are firstly that government should proactively upgrade and decarbonise poor quality housing stock, ensuring that sufficient long-term devolved funding is in place to provide the necessary market certainty. It should also improve the City Region's proposal for a national centre of excellence for modern methods of construction for housing and establish a national housing conversion fund to fund the transfer of private sector homes to social housing. Second, Liverpool City Region should progress with bus franchising, and government should ensure support is available for continued development of an integrated contactless payment system across buses, rail and other local travel services. Third, government needs to provide greater clarity in its plan for growth and the forthcoming Levelling Up white paper on the places and industries that are going to be prioritised. More detail is particularly needed on how these strategies will link to plans to tackle climate change. And finally here, national and local planning policy should aim to nurture community assets and social infrastructure in the city region and provide more routes for community ownership and management of assets such as parks and community centres. Next slide. And so our final theme in the report focuses on the transition to a net zero carbon economy. LTR is uniquely placed to lead this transition in the UK with innovations in sustainable energy at scale. Already the Burbo Bank offshore wind turbines provide enough energy for over 300,000 homes a year. Renewable energy, low carbon technology and clean growth sectors currently employ more than 27,000 people across the city region. And the proposed Mersey tidal power project could build on these strengths, generating predictable electricity for up to a million homes, creating thousands of jobs and strengthening the UK's energy security. We also recognise the importance of the emerging hydrogen economy here. Liverpool City Region is a focal point for the groundbreaking HyNet Northwest project, which aims to replace fossil fuels with clean hydrogen. The City Region is also transitioning public transport to hydrogen power with brand new double-decker hydrogen buses entering service next year. And local education providers, including universities, are already providing the City Region's residents with the skills needed to access jobs in the growing hydrogen sector, with 200,000 jobs nationwide projected in the next decade. And our final challenge is around enhancing green and blue infrastructure. Our changing climate presents a systematic challenge to the resilience of our infrastructure and our utility systems. However, climate proofing our physical infrastructure must be complemented by improvements to our natural environment. Nature-based solutions will be increasingly necessary to strengthen local resilience to extreme weather events, with trees helping to provide cooling during heat waves or water drainage during heavy rainfall. Such solutions to climate change will help to make communities stronger, but it would also help to make them greener, healthier and more prosperous places to live. Next slide. And so our final recommendations in the report are firstly, that the city region must be able to input into all decisions made by central government and regulators that impact on its ability to deliver net zero. Second, government should provide long-term policy and financial support for local policies that contribute to the shift to clean energy, and this must include planning and funding provision for marine and tidal energy. Third, government should recognise the potential of hydrogen in Liverpool City Region to contribute to the UK's climate change targets and to create thousands of good, sustainable jobs. And final recommendation is that government should ensure upcoming reforms to planning policy ensures protection for natural capital and supports green and blue infrastructure. Back to you, Steve.
Thank you. Thanks, James. That's brilliant. And just to finish. So I think the point is, and I do thank the Heseltine Institute who've clarified what needs to happen. And I think, as we know, the shame of it is that we can't just do that by ourselves. And I think the key issue is that we need collaboration across the city region in terms of taking that agenda forward, but also we need collaboration and partnership with the government. So I think the key message right at the end is it's not just about asking for more resources, but it's also about showing what the city region can achieve and how it could actually work with government to work together on all those issues where it and the city region share the same goal of levelling up and building back a better and greener recovery. So I think that concludes our little presentation. The report is available and hopefully everybody will have the chance to actually look at it in greater detail. But obviously now back to you, Kim.
Thanks so much, James and Steve, for running through the top lines of that report. And I think rightly, Steve, you do identify some challenges, particularly in terms of removal of the UC uplift and the end of furlough. And James, you identified that we have some great opportunities as a world leading region. So I would now like to call on members from the cross-party panel to say a few words. And we have Lord Heseltine, former Deputy Prime Minister, Jeff Smith, Shadow Local Government Officer, Baroness Hooper, Trade Envoy, and Steve Rotheram, Metro Mayor, Liverpool City Region. And I'd like to call Lord Heseltine to speak first. And just to remind you, you have 5 minutes. Thank you so much. Lord Heseltine, over to you.
I think you're on mute, Lord Heseltine. Lord Heseltine, can you hear us?
Lord Heseltine, can you unmute, please? Okay, maybe what I'll do is someone maybe can contact Lord Heseltine. I shall move on to the next speaker on the list, who is Jeff Smith, Shadow Local Government Minister. So over to you, Jeff, and we'll come back to Lord Heseltine. Oh,
I think was there.
Is that unmuted?
Thank you, Lord Heseltine. Thanks for joining us and taking your mute off. So you have 5 minutes to respond to the report that we've just heard some top lines from Steve and James. So thank you.
Well, I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to do this because I think there are important things about this report. First of all, it has been based on a very wide range of consultation. And so it's specifically tailor-made for the region about which it talks. And it's full of ideas, and that's, if I may say so, an unusual process. Normally, governments work out schemes they think will work, designed in Whitehall, and they tell local people what they can do. This is the reverse process, and it therefore is based on local people's understanding, and it talks about the strengths and weaknesses and has ideas to try and build on the strengths and to eradicate the weaknesses. Of course, one's got to realize that the real ultimate responsibility will lie and should lie, in my view, with a dialogue between the Mayor, Steve Rotheram, and the government itself. And I'm still extremely critical of the fact that after 2 years in power, we still haven't had the white paper. The other thing I would say is that while strongly supporting this initiative and much of the contents of the recommendations, of course, there will be other things that need to be considered. I have 2 ideas, which I personally would strongly advocate to the Mayor. The first is to build a new development corporation to the north of the old one. I think that should have happened. I'm sorry. I think that should have happened once the old one's lifetime came to an end. And my second idea, which coincides with much in the report, is that the agenda should go back to cleaning the Mersey. I happen to think that water in urban areas is going to be a big and controversial part of the political agenda in the next quarter century. And I would like to see a decision taken to prevent any discharges other than clean water into the Mersey from its tiny sources to the river at its peak. I think that would be a world-class initiative and would attract a lot of investment, a lot of political interest, and a lot of public support. But these are just ideas to add to what's in the report itself. My important thing is that there is such a report, that it has been based on wide consultation, and it removes any conceivable excuse the government could have for not actually living with the promise it has made to level up. The government has got to create effective partnerships, and we'll now see very rapidly whether Michael Gove's appointment is going to fulfill the hopes we have and the promises the government have made but not yet fulfilled.
Hi, Lord Heseltine. Have you finished with your contribution?
I think that was fine.
Lovely. Thank you so much for that. And I'm sure that your 2 ideas will invoke a lot of discussion and debate. So I'm going to now ask Jeff Smith, Shadow Local Government Officer Minister, to present. Thanks, Jeff.
Yes, thanks, Kim. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for letting a Manc across the virtual border into your city region. So I'm relatively new Shadow Minister for Local Government, so I'm really pleased to be here to welcome the report. Actually, I think it's a really excellent piece of work and a really important contribution to the debate around rebuilding our economy and how we develop public services. And really, I think shows the ambition of the partners in your region, in the Liverpool City region, to really reshape your area for the better. So, good jobs, better opportunities and skills, better housing and essential services, and the green objectives of the region. And as you said, Kim, it's a really timely contribution, because not only we've got the comprehensive spending review coming up, but we have the levelling up white paper promised. And as Lord Heseltine said, it's been disappointing that we've not had the devolution bill that's been promised for the last 2 years. It did appear to disappear. We are now promised this levelling up white paper in the autumn. It should be anytime soon. And maybe we'll find out in concrete terms what the government actually means by levelling up. Certainly, we look forward to it, with particularly with the new regime in the department and the renamed Levelling Up Department, to see what comes forward as concrete proposals. I think city regions like Liverpool need two things. They need the freedom and powers to innovate in order to lead to lead in their role as placemakers, and they need the resources to deliver on those freedoms, and the two things go together. I think this report makes the case really well for both those things. And I hope we see government ambition that will match your ambition in your city region, because there is a concern that, particularly recently, when you get mayors and local leaders like Steve and like Andy Burnham in my patch standing up to the government and challenging the government, maybe it'll rattle them a little bit and maybe they'll go cold. But I sense that having Michael Gobin in the new role as Secretary of State, it signals to me that it is a priority for the government, and I certainly hope that it is, because we need the government to match the ambition of your region. And it's really important at this time, because, as you'll know, the pandemic's taken a huge toll on everybody, but particularly on the Liverpool City region, because it's exposed the regional inequalities that have been rife in the UK for many, many years. We're one of the most regionally unbalanced countries in Europe. So this is another reason why it's really important to demonstrate the way out of this and to give power to our regions. Just to pick out a couple of issues that you've highlighted in the report, I particularly welcome the net zero ambitions. And what I particularly welcome is it's not just a section on net zero, although there is a section on net zero, but there is a real green thread running through the whole report. I think that's very, very welcome. And if you just take one recommendation, the recommendation on the housing stock, the upgrading and decarbonising, that's a really good example, I think, and it absolutely should be a key priority for local authorities and for the government, because it hits so many targets. It's not just about creating decent housing that will then create decent places for people to live and reduce health inequalities, but it's about creating jobs as you do that retrofit program. It's about upskilling people to do those jobs, as well as actually hitting our carbon zero, our net zero targets. So it just hits so many of those buttons that I think it ought to be a massive priority, in my view, for any government. And there's important, I think, net zero asks around hydrogen and tidal power, which I think are really interesting, and around transport, around the deregulation of buses, which I think is really important, and around cycling. There's nothing worse than the zeal of a convert, and I gave up my car a couple of years ago, and I now cycle into Parliament, I cycle at home, and I never thought I would do that, but I really think once you get people onto bikes, and it's particularly into segregated cycle lanes, it reveals to people that is an option. But you can only do it if you give other options as well for people to give up the car. So you need that better connected transport system, and in my view, deregulation of buses is absolutely key to that. And the other thing I would mention, I'm really pleased to see the recommendation around a London Challenge style intervention in schools, because I'm a big believer that follow the evidence and see what works. And London Challenge was a real success of the last Labour government, and it was raising standards for people in London long before anybody had spoken about levelling up. It was raising standards for an area that had struggled, and it was working as well in Greater Manchester when we had the Greater Manchester Challenge in the wake of London Challenge, until that was sadly cancelled as a result of the coalition cuts. So I'm really pleased to see that focus on a London Challenge style intervention in schools. From a Labour point of view, as Shadow Minister, there's a huge amount in this report we'd agree with in principle, and you know, I can't make our policy, but I think you will see I'd like to think you'll see a lot of these asks that will be part of our program in future. My boss in the shadow team, Steve Reed, is very fond of saying what we want to do is win power in order to give power away, which is something that politicians say a lot and opposition politicians often say, but I genuinely think that he is a Shadow Secretary of State who's committed to that agenda and really believes in devolution and making things happen for regions. And finally, I suppose, just on that issue about resources, you can have all the power you can get, but without proper investment in regions, you're not going to be able to get too far. So it's really important that we have a government that's committed to investing in devolution, investing in our regions and our local authorities. We're in an era where that investment is going in at the moment as a matter of necessity as a result of the pandemic. There's a lot of government spending, but that's kind of emergency spending. And what we need is a government with a vision to make long-term investment in the kind of initiatives and asks that you've got in your report. And I hope we'll see the government matching that. And if not, then there's a government waiting to take over in order to do that. So I'll close there. And thanks again for inviting me, and welcome the report.
Thank you so much, Steve. And it's really nice for someone from Manchester to be so supportive, and particularly in your shadow minister role. And I think I agree with you in terms of freedoms and resources to help and benefit, because I think it's going to be beneficial to the whole of the region. So Liverpool City region and Manchester. So thanks for those contributions. We're going to take some questions and answers after Steve Rotheram. So if people have any questions, please put in the chat box or use the raise hand function. So I'm going to pass over now to Baroness Hooper, who is Trade Envoy. So over to you, Baroness. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim, and hello, everybody. And thank you for inviting me to participate in the launch of this important and comprehensive report. And I'd like to congratulate the authors and the all-party parliamentary group for initiating the idea. As a trade envoy to Panama, Costa Rica, and the Dominican Republic, I'm naturally keen to build on Liverpool's standing and famous brand as the major British port for the Americas. And when I say that, I mean not only Canada and the United States in the north, but also Mexico, Central America, and the whole of South America. Trade means think ideas and innovation, think jobs producing goods and services for export, and think suitable markets. So everything to do with this report is a very useful and up-to-date marker of the opportunities as well as the needs of the Liverpool City region. And everything to do with the ports is, of course, of prime importance. So there's lots to build on, from decarbonisation and the energy, the move for clean energy. So I like all the priorities that are outlined in the report, and in particular in relation to clean, green, and inclusive growth. And I like everything to do with building on the strengths in the education field. My mother was a teacher in Liverpool way before the war, before she was married. And so I really owe that to her. And so education as a key priority, as outlined by James Hickson, is something that I would push for in all my dealings. Also, as the first member of the European Parliament to represent Liverpool way back in 1979, I'm aware of many of the social issues and above all, the importance of cooperation between local and central government. And I think Lord Heseltine is a very good example of that and what can be done when somebody is prepared to bite the bullet. So let's hope this report represents the start of a new phase for Liverpool. I look forward to the rest of the programme. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Baroness Hooper, for your contributions. And I think you make a very valid point about the importance of cooperation between local and national government. And let's hope, you know, that they see the benefit of this report and put the money where the mouth is, and give us some the resources to help us to implement some of these recommendations that we've identified. I'm going to pass over now to Steve Rotheram, Metro Mayor, Liverpool City Region. Over to you, Steve.
Thanks, Chair. Lord Heseltine was absolutely correct, wasn't he, when he said at the outset that it should be for local people to determine their own destiny. And that's what devolution is about. And Jeff Smith said quite rightly that they have the ability to innovate. And so this report is really interesting to us, because I'll explain how we've been able to perhaps do those two things. But just before me, Baroness Hooper spoke about international relations, and I've just left a Teams meeting with Lord Grimstone to press exactly for that, for the government to put the Liverpool City region of trade negotiations and discussions with countries in the Americas, specifically the USA, but also considering our transatlantic trade focus, which sets us apart from other free ports. So there's something there with that history, I think, that we can exploit and optimise. Just to pick up again with Lord Heseltine's point on the New Development Corporation, this is something that I've floated with the Chief Executive of Liverpool City Council, Tony Reeves, and I'm sure that the MPs will be interested in developing this further, and I think we can then feed back and let Lord Heseltine and others know of the progress that we're making. And just finally, on the other point that he picked up on about the River Mersey, and Lord Heseltine, you've sort of stole my thunder a little bit, because we will be making an announcement in the next couple of weeks. So I did listen to you 2 years or more ago when you said that this is something that we should aim for in the city region. So watch for the press release. Just quickly then going on to the recommendations in the report ahead of the spending review. I think it's really vital that the government does respond, and it's absolutely right, for instance, that they should help us with London-style interventions to improve attainment levels in our schools. But we're going further than that. We don't just wait for the government to do stuff for us. So I met with Sir Paul Grant yesterday, and he's pulling together our delivery plan now from the strategy that's been agreed in principle by the 6 local authorities, so that we can cohere our education efforts around across the whole city region. Again, with the recommendations in the report, they talk about further devolution around adult education funding. And I think this is really hard for government to resist, given the huge improvements that we've made in adult education budget, attainment levels since we took control of the budget in 2018. Over the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 months, whatever it is, since 5 months since being re-elected, I've spent most of that period looking at projects that can have a transformational effect in the Liverpool City region. So I went to Pilkington's a few weeks ago as part of the High Net initiative, and that can decarbonise energy intensive industries and put us as a city region, but if you can do it here, you can do it anywhere across the globe, but it'll put us in the lead on climate emergency agenda aspects. So again, the government needs to be looking favourably on what we're doing on public transport. People will know we're currently testing our brand new trains, £500 million worth of investment that we've made as the people in the Liverpool City region, not waiting for central government, doing that ourselves, publicly owned. But I've held numerous discussions with secretaries of state about further ambitions to take back control of the whole rail network, and I have to say it's like banging your head against a brick wall at times. It's so painful. So no huge progress on that, but we're hoping to press on with that. And of course, we've got all the raw ingredients here. It was mentioned about buses. Manchester are about 9 months ahead of where we are, but we're 4 years ahead, so we've caught up. But we want to re-regulate our buses so that we can integrate the bus network with our ferries and our trains and our active travel to make it a truly London-style integrated transport system that's fit for the 21st century. And then just very quickly, Chair, because I know we've run out of time, the spending review is probably our last opportunity for the city region to obtain anything meaningful in terms of capital funding. It's not just the quantum of the money we're getting. We need some longevity to it. It needs to be sustainable. The worst thing that happens is that you switch the tap on and off, and we've got to stop this if we're to truly see the investments maximising the opportunities that we've got in the city region. So, you know, we've got through 10, 11 years of austerity and we're still very vibrant in the city region. You spoke about bounce back better, build back better. These, you know, build back fairer. These are just terms. We're doing them in the city region. We've got £150 million currently in our COVID recovery plan. We've given the government the opportunity to invest in our area and said, if you invest in £1.4 billion, you can get £8.8 billion back. And we just need the government to work with the combined authority and we'll do the rest. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you so much, Steve. And, you know, you've done a great job in terms of challenging the government and getting support for the region. And hopefully they will see the benefits of this report. As I mentioned earlier, we do now have opportunities for Q&A and contributions from the floor. I've asked Owen if he can let me know if anybody has any questions, because I can't see the hand raise function across all of the participants at the moment. So
no hands raised at the moment. If anyone wants to ask a question. Oh, there you go. George Howarth, Kim.
George, you're on mute, hon.
I'm not now.
Oh, no, you're not. We can hear you loud and clear. Thanks, George. Go ahead. You have the floor.
Yeah, just 2 points. First of all, very strongly welcome the report. I think it crystallises some of the things that can be done and what support we'll need in order to do them. So, you know, a warm welcome to that. 2 points. First of all, on net zero carbon. I attended an event hosted by Amazon, which are a big employer in my constituency, about to become bigger, to launch or to discuss a report that the Social Market Foundation have done. And one of the, it's worth Steve and others looking at the report if you haven't already done so, because one of their key recommendations is that local governments should be empowered to carry out the work necessary to do that, because they know exactly what the challenges are locally and how to meet them. The second point, which might be a little bit controversial, is on the, you know, London Challenge style approach. I think, I wonder anyway, whether or not post-14 education is now best placed in schools, and whether all post-14 education, whether it's skilled training or academic training, should be college-based. And I just throw that out there as a thought. I know not everyone will agree with me, but I do think a lot of young people have either disengaged with school by the time they're 14, or have outgrown it in other ways. So it's worth a look at, I think.
Thank you for your contribution, George. And I think, education is key and critical to our region. And I know as a member of the Education Select Committee and understanding some of the data from my own constituency, I think it's quite worrying that so many young people don't have the right grades at maths and English, which prevents them to moving on and doing higher grade courses. So I think looking at providing more investment into education, I think, is going to be key and critical, for young people who have been hit extremely hard throughout this pandemic. So so Mick Whitley have a question. Mick, thank you. You're on mute though. Thanks, now. Mick. You're not loud and clear.
Just a couple of points. First of all, I welcome that report. I thought it was excellent, and I'll be downloading that shortly. I just want to go to a point that Baroness Hooper made about the importance of Liverpool, as a port city. Obviously, there's a lot of problems, in the supply chain at the moment. We're getting sold on the select committee I sit on, which is the International Trade Committee, and what we've got is we seem to be having cartels running containers. Running the ships coming into Western Europe, and you can see now, like, the price of containers have gone up from 2,000 to 20,000. So there's a lot of difficulty in getting consumer goods, say from China, and that's really important for me into Liverpool. And we need to have a look into this. I think there should be a government's inquiry into the way shipping is coming in, and the way the number of shipping firms now it's controlling the transportation of these containers. And the other thing, of course, is when we first went into the European Union in the 70s, 74, 75, we had a big merchant fleet. That we used to carry cargoes around the world. We haven't got that fleet anymore. We should be looking at, if you're talking about levelling up, we should be looking at that industry to level up, and we should be getting a share of that, because obviously this government is making treaties all around the world now, particularly CPT, in the Pacific Rim countries, as well as South America. So in that aspect, I think we need to have a look at that. Also agree with Steve Rodman's points, about developments and about the direct investments into the city region. It shouldn't be drip fed. It should be, I'm looking around when we all go around the parliament, we're on different committees. There's hell of a lot of money going into Teesside at this moment in time, and they seem to be getting large quantities of money and investments in there. What makes you think, why is that? But that's not for here to say. But I think we should be mindful of that, and we should be getting equal amounts of investments, particularly on decarbonation and particularly on hydrogen as well. So yeah, I think it's all this review that's coming up shortly. I'd like to see a large chunk of money going to Liverpool, and anything that obviously that we can do as MPs down there, we will do, no problem. Thanks.
Thank you, Mickey, and we'll always advocate for large chunks of funding coming into Liverpool. Baroness Hooper, would you like to respond to some of the points that Mickey has made?
Yes, certainly, and I certainly fully agree with the focus on the Port of Liverpool and its activities. And again, if we talk about decarbonisation and the hydrogen issue, these are exportable knowledge and services that can add to the possibilities for Liverpool, not only to be asking for money, but for using it for Liverpool people to help themselves and to raise money in Liverpool by exporting the valuable things that they have innovated in Liverpool.
Thank you, Baroness Hooper. Steve, did you want to come back on any of the points that Mickey raised then, particularly around hydrogen? Because I know that, you know, we are really pushing forward as a region on those issues. And I had the great opportunity of going to visit and pretended to drive one of our hydrogen trains recently.
Yeah, some fantastic innovations, and the Baroness is right about R&D and our ability to export that to other countries, and that's what we're focusing on as well. Not just the physical manufacture of something, but what is the IP of that? What are the skills that we can capture? How can we sell that around the world? So we're doing a lot of that. But just to pick up on our point, we don't ask for money from governments. Don't ask for money from governments at all. We give governments the opportunity to invest and get a return on that investment. It's a very different approach from the Liverpool City region than ever before. And as I said, £1.4 billion, which is a big ask, but it's an £8.8 billion return to Treasury. So I think those sort of multiplier effects are really important, because everybody is going down to Treasury, aren't they, and putting forward great ideas. So ours has to stand on its own on 2 feet, and that's what we're doing. I think Mick's absolutely right about some of the problems that we've seen in a post-Brexit world, of people exploiting the opportunities across the globe. It really, isn't it? But we're seeing some of the results of that with the problems we're seeing in shops, for instance, and that's a much bigger issue. Just on George's point about education, I think it's something to be debated. I genuinely think you could have a very lively debate about the issue on whether we should give some people the opportunity to move out of schools and into a different type of education. But I'd much prefer to look at the curriculum, and that's what we're doing. So Paul Grant is looking at leadership and management, teaching and learning, and collaboration, because there's some really, really good things happening in our schools. The problem is that they're almost set up because of I have to say, Michael Gove in this case, but they're all almost set up to compete against each other. And actually what they need to do is to work with each other and to share that best practice across the geography. And that's what we're trying to encourage with our approach here. Sometimes, despite what DFE, who I have to say are an awful government department, but despite what they're doing to us, we're trying to find ways to get some freedoms to do things differently. But we'd love to work with government and pilot some of these things.
Thanks very much, Steve. Martin's put a comment in the chat. I don't know whether Martin's still here and wants to say something about the tidal project.
Yes, thank you. So for those that don't know me, Martin Land, Tidal Project Director for Liverpool City Region Combined Authority. I think it's a great report. It's great to see Tidal in there. And I think the messaging on long-term renewables projects in the local area is just so important. At the time we're seeing the spikes in international gas price, you know, reliability, predictability is something that we can offer. It's a big investment, but it's there for a long time. And, you know, just really welcome the report. And I think it's just great timing. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Martin. And I think particularly this week, where we've been held to ransom to a certain point by CF Industries, who produce CO2, now being bailed out by this government. Anyway, that's another discussion for another day, I think. But we've got no more questions in the chat, so I would just maybe like to. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, if I may jump back in. Just,
go on, Baroness. Thank you.
Excuse me, but Steve Rotheram raised the issue of the national curriculum, and one of the campaigns that I support very strongly is the need to teach modern languages. And of course, in the context of my earlier remarks and trade and with the Americas, Spanish is really important. So I hope that Liverpool City region will focus on that as well as the other important issues of maths and science. Thank you.
Thanks, Baroness. Super. And I think, you know, there's some of the issues that maybe need to be picked up directly with some of our schools and providing aspirations for young people to undertake modern foreign languages. Chris Matthews has put a comment in the chat. Don't know whether Chris wants to say something directly.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. I was welcoming the section of the report about blue and green infrastructure. And in particular, the retrofit in houses. And we often hear about energy efficiency retrofit. It's really just to make that case that we should be considering water efficiency at the same time as energy efficiency, because that will be a more efficient way to future-proof housing stock. So I would very much encourage people when they're looking at programs like that to bring water efficiency into the discussion. After all, using hot water drives a lot of carbon emissions. So there's a link between the two of them. Also, just building on the comments made by Lord Heseltine about water quality in the River Mersey, which as an organisation we've worked on for many, many years. I think it's just worth pointing out there's a natural link between that and the management of surface water and flooding risk, and that actually the work that we can do to promote sustainable drainage solutions through the planning system and get people to hold back that flow of water in Liverpool and actually upstream in Greater Manchester as well is going to be really, really important, helping us achieve those water quality ambitions that are there, because it can't just be done through drainage infrastructure alone, complexities and cost. We need to be looking at surface water runoff and urban drainage, and the planning system as such are a key player in that.
Thanks so much, Chris. And I think, again, some really important points, because I know that some people across our region were affected by some flooding recently. So I think, you know, some valid points that we need to be looking at as well. So again, given that there are no more questions, I think there are no more questions, or unless Lord Heseltine wants to come back on any of the points raised before I just conclude this meeting, Lord Heseltine.
Well, it's been an interesting discussion. The only point I would make is there's been a lot of talk of what, don't misunderstand me, the sort of fashionable industries, you know, the clean air and clean this and zero this, and none of those are unimportant. They're all important. But my guess is that if we look at the economy of Greater Liverpool 20 years from now, basically it will be quite similar to what it is today. And so it's very important to recognize that one is in the levelling up agenda, in the growth agenda, you start with what you've got, and it's important to look at what you've got and to make it better, or set it free, give it opportunities, invest in it, whatever it may be. And that is, I think, a very important thing to have in one's mind when one is looking at how you improve the quality of an economy. You want to look at the whole economy as it is today. Let me give you the most obvious example. Liverpool is one of the great tourist centres of the UK. And tourism, once we get out of this COVID problem, is obviously going to be a huge industry as far ahead as you can see. And so looking at the facilities for the tourist industry, not just the quality of the hospitality industry, but the attractions that can be there and where they are located. Because obviously, if you are trying to deal with the greater region, putting everything into the centre of Liverpool doesn't actually square every circle. And so I think it's important just to stand back and concentrate on quality across the range. I strongly support what's been said about education. And it is frankly appalling that if you read the inspectors' reports going back over the years, there's a phrase which I hardly dare use: a tolerance of indifference north of Birmingham. And that's unforgivable. And that is not a party political point or anything like that. That is the inspectorate talking about local school quality. And we have these deprived communities, and everybody knows where they are. I tried to do something about it with City Challenge, and there was a City Challenge deal in Liverpool which worked, and a very good one in Manchester which worked. But the scheme came to an end. Why? We should be, there were huge opportunities to go to some of these deprived areas and empower the local people who live there, get them to feel a pride in their area, make it where they want to attract people to come and live. Well, anyway, you know, these are all ideas which add to the eloquence of your own report, which, as I say, I very strongly welcome.
Thank you, Lord.
I also, one last thing I'd say, if there was one job I would love, it's Steve Rotheram's, but Steve, relax, I'm not in the market.
There you go. Steve, watch out, someone's coming behind you. Anyway, guys, I'd just like to say thank you all for coming today. Thanks for the panelists and to Steve and James for the presentation on the report. It is a very detailed report about how our region can build back better. You know, there is the link in the chat to Retreat. We will be sending the report to a number of secretaries of state. So that includes the BEIS team, EIS team. And I'd just like to say that our very own Mick Whitley is now the PPS to Ed Miliband, who sits on that. It'll be going to the Levelling Up Housing Communities and the Treasury. And I'd call on MPs and peers to support the report in Parliament and Retreat whenever possible. So it just leaves me to say thank you and enjoy the rest of your day, everybody, and share the report as far as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Awesome. Cheers. Thank you.